I'm Ben, and I'm a practicum student with the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point here at Schmeekley Reserve. And today we're going to be having another edition of Nature Notes. That's right, Nature Notes. So, to get started, what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking a little bit about soil. Now, when you think of soil, you might think of this stuff in the jar here. Soil, some people will call it dirt. I guess a more appropriate name is soil. It's called soil. Dirt's kind of the common name that people have given it over the years. But we're going to learn a little bit about Schmeekley soils and a little bit about where they came from and why they are what they are, especially in this area in central Wisconsin. So to get started, 18,000 years ago, the state of Wisconsin had a giant ice sheet coming in from the east over here by Lake Michigan. Now this was called the Laurentide Ice Sheet. 18,000 years ago, it started to move west across the land, and as it did, it ended up colliding with this area here, the Baraboo Hills, where we see Baraboo nowadays, the city, sort of around the Madison area. Now when that happened, this ice sheet began to be pushed up and to the west, so north and west. And that's where the ice sheet ended up stopping, was the northwestern part of this, well, northwest of that area, which is the central part of Wisconsin. Now a lot of people will refer to the central part of Wisconsin as the Sand Plains. And there's a reason for that. You see, after that ice sheet stopped, what happened was it began to melt and it formed Glacial Lake, Wisconsin. And when that happened, the Glacial Lake existed for about, give or take, 4,000 years. Now what happened over those 4,000 years is the lake began to slowly receive small amounts of sand and silt from northern and western Wisconsin. There were small streams that were depositing sand and silt into the lake, which is where we see a lot of our sandy soils in central Wisconsin nowadays, especially in areas around Highway 94, Stevens Point, Whiting, and Plover. So, after that happened, the lake would eventually drain about 14,000 years ago south, and it would eventually drain just into different areas. A lot of it went to Lake Michigan, and that's generally where that ended up. Now, what happened with a lot of that sand nowadays is that we have sandy soils here in central Wisconsin. So this is a map of Schmeekley, and this is a web soil survey. You can go look this up too if you would like on websoilsurvey.com. And this is something that you can look at. And there are 4 different types of soils that make up most of Schmeekley Reserve. Most of these are composed of sands and loams. Now when I say sands, pretty self-explanatory, it's mostly composed of sand. But when I say loam, what that means is that sand, silt, and clay. Now generally we have what we call sandy loams or loamy sands. Now those generally are composed of more so sand than our silt and our clay, which is why we see a lot of sand when you dig down in the soil. We have about 6 inches to 9 inches of topsoil, that organic matter, that black stuff that we like to see, and the rest is mostly composed of sand. Especially if we look at the state soil, the Anago silt loam, this is what we see. We see a good portion of this topsoil, which is that organic matter, and then it slowly transitions, and actually in some cases very rapidly transitions, into mostly sand. And that's what we have a lot of over here in Schmeekley Reserve. Now when we look at this map, I said that there are 4 different kinds of soils. Most of these are loamy sands. We have the Mihan loamy sand, which is mostly our wetland soils. They're mostly sands. They're not well drained, so they hold on to a lot of water. And these are mostly outwash plains from glaciers. The other ones are the Plainfield loamy sand and the Point sandy loam. And those are mostly composed of sand, but have small amounts of clay and silt, which allows that water holding retention. That's how water really sticks around. A lot of times when you walk through Schmeekley, you might see more water sticking around. And our last one, which is about 1/4 of Schmeekley's soils, is called the Roscommon muck. And that's a lot of our wetland soils too. It's about 9 inches of muck. So that's stuff that you think of when you think of a wetland, mostly muck, and then it moves into sand. So that's where a lot of our soils come from, but certain trees and certain plants grow really well on these soils. So when we look at Schmeekley Reserve, most of our trees are endowed pine trees. So this is a red pine. It does really, really well on sandy soils. It holds a little bit of water, and it likes to make the soil very acidic when its needles drop. So what happens is when those needles drop, it makes the soil acidic and makes it somewhat harder for other plants to grow. Other plants definitely can grow, but it does make it more difficult. Grows really well in sand. Another tree you might find is a white pine. Again, very common in Wisconsin because we have sandy soils, especially in the central part of the state. Another tree that grows very, very well on sandy soils. However, this one does require a lot of light to grow. So in a lot of cases you might see red pine stands growing and then white pine growing slowly underneath. Both grow well in sandy soils, and both are very, very unique to an area like this. This has been another edition of Nature Notes. Thanks for stopping by.